Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, November 12th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, I hope you had a good 3-day weekend there.
Yes, it was lovely. And here in the Northeast, we got a 1/4 inch of rain, Moshe, which is the most that we've gotten in a month, more than a month.
Yeah, no, us in the Northeast, we're starting to feel like some of you folks feel out west or in the South, where we're like, we got a 1/4 inch of rain. Because, I mean, literally, I walked outside on Saturday in New York City, and you could smell wildfire smoke, both coming from New Jersey and New York. And they're continuing to fight. I mean, they're not by wildfires by your California standards or West Coast standards, but here in the Northeast, still pretty significant by our standards.
Yes, we know that people in California are rolling their eyes as
right.
We're saying.
They laugh at our earthquakes and they laugh at our wildfires here.
But it's a big deal to us. Everything's relative.
Also, one note, I got messages from several of you on Instagram Friday. We had said, enjoy the 3-day weekend, kids are off of school. I was informed by some of you that some of your kids did have school and various commitments yesterday. So I hope I did not mislead you, and I hope that you made sure to check the schedule and not just take our word for it here on the pod.
Yeah, if all of a sudden your school was calling, wondering where your kid was, I guess you could blame us. So we apologize for that. Moshe, it was a news-filled weekend as always. So let's get to the headlines here. Donald Trump begins to pick his cabinet and senior advisors, including his UN ambassador, plus who's going to be running the EPA. Also, we are getting a better sense of Trump's plans for the largest deportation in American history. And it comes as Trump is trying to assert control with the new U.S. Senate.
Yeah, he wants those Republicans to get in line. He doesn't want any of the pushback that he got the first time he was president.
Plus, cryptocurrencies are hitting record highs with major hopes for what a Trump presidency could bring.
The crypto bros are celebrating right now, Jill.
Overseas, we'll get into the aftermath of the assault of Israeli soccer fans in the streets of Amsterdam late last week, and a warning for fans planning to attend an upcoming game this week. And a Spirit Airlines jet is hit by gunfire while trying to land in Haiti as the country boots its latest leader. Plus, an update on a story we first told you about last week. Authorities in South Carolina are making progress as they try to recapture more than 40 monkeys who escaped from a research facility. Moshe, I cannot believe some of them are still on the loose.
As of this recording, there's 18 monkeys on the loose. Jill, they're using food to try to bring them back in.
Always works on me. And Mattel pulls their newest dolls off the shelves after packaging sends customers, Moshe, you cannot make this one up, to a porn site.
Apparently the word wicked tripped them up, Joe.
Plus Moshe is on this day in history.
Your clue today, if you're a fly gal, get your nails done.
Moshe, I do not hate Missy Elliott kicking off the podcast on a Tuesday.
Jill, it's the second Missy Elliott reference in 2 weeks. Remember last week when all the conservatives dressed up in garbage bags for Halloween? We noted here on the pod and on the Instagram account, Missy wore it best first when she wore the garbage bag in that music video about 20 years ago.
She's like, guys, I've been doing this since 94.
Don't steal my look. Don't steal my look. I did it 30 years ago. All right, let's get started here. Today marks 1 week since President Trump was re-elected, and he is wasting no time announcing a number of key cabinet roles and senior advisory roles here as he just begins his transition. Late Monday night, we learned that his choice for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, Rubio was very high up on his VP list. In fact, was one of the finalists before he decided instead to go with J.D. Vance. So Rubio now getting the very prestigious slot of Secretary of State, at least nominated for that, though no concern there that he will be confirmed by the Senate. Also, late Monday, we learned that another Floridian, Congressman Mike Waltz of Florida, has been tapped to be his national security advisor, a key position that has existed since the 1950s. Not a position that requires Senate confirmation, but one that has been extremely influential when we think about national security advisors in years past, talking about people like Condoleezza Rice, Henry Kissinger, etc. So what's interesting here with the choice of Rubio and Waltz is right away we have two folks who are very aggressive, So what's interesting here with the choices of Rubio and Walz is both men very hawkish on China, very aggressive towards China, see China as a threat. That's something that Rubio has made a key position since he first joined the U.S. Senate more than a decade ago. Both of them very pro-Israel when it comes to that conflict vis-a-vis Hamas. And both, interestingly, are supportive of Ukraine and their war effort. They have voted to fund Ukraine over the last couple of years, but both now want the war to come to an end. So not part of the Republican wing, like the Nikki Haley wing of the party that wants to continue to fund Ukraine no matter what against Vladimir Putin, but also not a part of the Republican wing that is sort of apologist for Putin, the Tucker Carlson wing, you could say, of the party. Interesting choice here in Rubio and Walz as they sort of ride the middle there, at least when it comes to the Republican Party is concerned. Again, supportive of Zelensky in the effort, but feeling that after 2.5 years, that what the U.S. is doing now is just supporting a stalemate, and the war does need to come to an end. So we will see how this all plays out, what dynamic Trump is looking for in his cabinet, but a slight sigh of relief right now as he was considering some more extreme isolationist folks, and both Rubio and Walz see a role for the U.S. in the world. And on the spectrum here are more closely tied to more traditional Republican views on a number of key issues globally. But Jill, that wasn't all on Monday, as he nominated a couple other folks.
Nominated on Monday, his picks for UN ambassador, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, and another New Yorker, former Congressman Lee Zeldin, to run the EPA. We'll have more on them in a bit. Also yesterday, he named Tom Homan, the former head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, as the border czar overseeing his deportation policy. Trump said that his priority is executing the largest deportation in American history for the estimated 12 to 18 million undocumented migrants living here. Assisting in that effort will be Stephen Miller, one of his longest serving top immigration advisors, who will be the deputy chief of staff for policy in the incoming White House. Both Miller and Homan served roles in the first Trump administration with a focus on the border. Homan was a controversial figure in Trump's first term because he oversaw the zero tolerance policy that separated several thousand families of undocumented immigrants. That policy stopped during the Trump administration, but they have talked about reviving it, although a U.S. judge ruled last year that it is illegal to separate families even if they cross into the country illegally. A little background on Homan. He served as the acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, from 2017 to 2018, but he was never confirmed by the Senate. So he now takes on a border czar role, which also does not need Senate confirmation because it's not an official position like many other quote unquote czars, Moshe.
There's so many czars. Nixon started this, and now we have like dozens of czars, which they sound powerful, but ultimately don't really run anything. They're just there as coordinators.
So yeah, this is more of a coordination role. He'll be working with the secretaries of Homeland Security and other agencies related to this. As acting ICE director, Homan scrapped an Obama-Biden policy that focused on arresting immigrants in the country illegally who had serious criminal histories. Under his watch, ICE ramped up its raids on meatpacking plants and other places where Spanish-speaking immigrants were known to gather. Trump officials all say they'll begin by prioritizing the deportation of individuals who are here illegally, who have committed crimes, and then move on to other people who are here illegally. Homan has not ruled out anyone. So Moshe, it sounds like everything is on the table here.
That's what it sounds like. There was also an interview over the weekend with Jim Jordan, the congressman from Ohio, close Trump ally, very hard line on immigration. He was asked over on CNN, like, what about the Dreamers? These are the 3.5 million people here who were brought to America as small children. In many cases, they've gone on to college, have careers here, have families here, but they effectively were brought into the country illegally, even though some of them have spent decades and don't even speak the language, don't even know, never been to that country, don't remember that country. And Jordan was like, well, we'll start with criminals, but everything is on the table here. And so we shall see what they're able to do here in the coming 4 years. I mean, keep in mind, Trump the first time around ran into a lot of legal obstacles with various strategies here. You already see the ACLU, other groups, a whole number of states lining up with suits here. California, New York, Illinois, Massachusetts, all effectively saying, we're not going to cooperate with this. Now, many are on board with kicking out criminals, but then not beyond that. And so that is where, you're going to have a huge discussion here. Lawsuits, judges ruling, which circuits will they be putting these things in? Because remember, Trump appointed several hundred judges last time he was president. So ideally, they're going to want to go through those judges. And then some of these cases may end up in the Supreme Court where they have a 6-3 supermajority. So as we saw with Biden on the student loan program, right, his student loan deferment, here, there will be lawsuits and questions about presidential authority here when it comes to deportation. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Trump is thinking about invoking a law from 1798 passed by President John Adams that he hopes will help expedite all of this. Will that go through? Will that be deemed constitutional 230 years later? That's unclear. But as I mentioned, you have a bunch of lawsuits. You have sanctuary cities, counties, states across the country, a number of them saying they're not going to cooperate here. Why is that significant? Because to deport, you need a lot of resources. And ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has limited resources right now. Now, you will see the question is just how much will the Republican Congress, Senate, and House give him to do this? Then you still have to recruit and hire and train in order to handle all of that, even with billions of dollars. And then you need immigration judges to handle the deportations. There's a more than 1 year backlog right now of cases. Why? There's a shortage of judges. This is something we brought up last year, that bipartisan legislation, Republicans, Biden White House were trying to pass, that Trump actually quashed because he didn't want anything solved on immigration before he became president because he wanted to run on it. Well, that actually talked about billions more for immigration judges, etc. So now they'll have to pass that again and then again. Find the judges, recruit them, find the cases. So there's a lot of difficulties to the plan here in terms of how efficient he wants it to be. The goal here is partially rhetorical. Even if he can't deport as many people as he wants to, 15 to 20 million people, a lot of what he's trying to do here is scare people from crossing into the border. As you've seen in recent years, you've seen a surge at the border because the feeling out there was that the Biden administration is very amenable if you're claiming asylum, and you can move about the country for a while, a couple of years, if not longer. Now, Trump, with this rhetoric, is saying, don't even mess. And so he's hoping that message gets out there to Central America, to people around the world who want to come. And notable here, Jill, that he's beginning with immigration. Usually some of your first picks are like Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State in the transition. Trump has made a point that a few of his first picks are all related to immigration, signaling the importance here both to his base voters and the country.
Well, Moshe, it was certainly a theme of his campaign, one in which resonated with voters. So I guess not too surprising that he's deciding to act on that quickly. Among the other picks that we learned on Monday, again, we mentioned former New York Congressman Lee Zeldin. He is a lawyer. He's going to be running the EPA. Zeldin wrote that he will help, quote, restore U.S. energy dominance, revitalize our auto industry to bring back American jobs, and make the U.S. the global leader of AI. And he says we'll do so while protecting access to clean air and water.
Yeah, interesting emphasis there, and it gives you a sense of the viewpoint that they have of the EPA. While many Democrats would say, my primary job is about protecting the environment and making industry work around us, he basically flipped it and said it's about energy dominance, and we'll do all of that while protecting clean air and water.
And as we pointed out on this podcast, we are already pretty dominant when it comes to providing at least oil.
Yeah. Yes. For those of you who haven't tuned in previous episodes, we are the world's largest producer of oil, and we are now producing more oil than any country ever has in the history of the planet.
But nobody wants to talk about it. The Democrats don't want to admit it, and the Republicans don't want to admit it.
We'll wait for the Republican press release in February. Once Trump takes over, he'll be able to announce, just like we could have announced for the past 18 months, that this was the latest month with the most oil produced in history.
Zeldin, by the way, does not have an extensive background in environmental issues. He's voted to end Clean Air Act standards. He has a 14% lifetime score from the League of Conservation Voters. That is a liberal environment group, for his votes against many environmental bills, with the notable exception of a measure to protect ecologically and culturally significant areas. Trump also named Congresswoman Elise Stefanik to be the next ambassador to the United Nations. So you might remember her from the congressional anti-Semitism hearings, where Stefanik challenged the university presidents, basically asking them if Protesters called for the genocide of Jews, if that was protected under the code of conduct of schools or if it was allowed protected speech. Those clips went viral. The New York Congresswoman is the fourth ranking House Republican in leadership. She's been a strong ally of Trump's and a major fundraiser for the GOP. She was originally elected in 2014 as the youngest woman in Congress at the time. She used to be more moderate. She wouldn't actually even say Trump's name in 2016 in her race back then. But then voters in her district went more toward Trump, and she followed. Stefanik has repeatedly attacked the UN as anti-Semitic. Last month, she called for a complete reassessment of U.S. funding of the United Nations in response to efforts by the Palestinian Authority to actually expel Israel from the UN. The Trump administration is expected to take a much more critical approach to the United Nations and likely cut funding to multiple UN agencies and programs.
So you saw a bit of that in the first term with Nikki Haley. Remember, Nikki Haley was Trump's first UN ambassador back when he was president the first time around, calling out the UN, taking a much more critical approach. As of the latest numbers, the U.S. funds the UN to the tune of $18 billion a year. We provide approximately about a third of the UN budget. The U.S. was giving about $10 billion a year to the UN during the Trump years. So imagine they will take that down a notch, maybe back to 10, maybe lower. We'll see. But we'll be watching her as she challenges the folks over at the UN, which has become increasingly dominated by the Iranians, the Chinese, and other groups, authoritarian governments around the world, and much less relevant when it comes to peacemaking. Speaking of Nikki Haley, his first UN ambassador, Trump made a point over the weekend of saying she will not be getting a job in his administration. He put out a post on social media. He also mentioned Mike Pompeo, his former CIA director and Secretary of Defense, saying Pompeo, Nikki Haley, they're not getting jobs in the second administration. He could have just not selected them, but he made a point of saying, putting it out there, being like, just for the record, for anybody asking, they're not invited second time around, but I wish them good luck. And then Nikki Haley replied being like, I wish you good luck, Mr. President.
But Moshe, I want people to really think about that. This would be like if you didn't even apply for a job and a company put out a memo saying,
we're not hiring you.
We're, just for the record, we're not hiring you. It's like, well, thank you. I mean, obviously these were names that were being talked about.
Behind the scenes, they were being talked about, but Trump wanted to make a point here. It's a signal to his right flank that he's not even flirting with people with a different worldview than him. They're viewed as more traditionalist, the Republican Party, about the U.S. role in the world, called, neocons by some of the Republican side, warmongers by people like RFK. So, he's very much taking a different approach here and wanted to prove that point. By the way, Trump wants to prove the fact that everyone who said, hey, you need Nikki Haley voters to win the election, you need to have her by your side. He chose not to do that. He won despite that. So he's sort of like, well, see, I don't need her. It all comes as Trump did name his chief of staff late last week. That is Susie Wiles. You might know her. You might not, because she takes a very low-key approach. She was the co-campaign manager of this most recent campaign. She now takes on effectively the most powerful role in the White House besides being president. When you're chief of staff, this is a role that's existed for the better part of a century here. You run the door. You run who gets to the president, what gets to the president. Trump likes to call her the Ice Maiden. And she made a point of trying to strike a balance here between letting Trump be Trump and take his phone calls with various folks out there, but keeping things on track. I love this quote from someone near her to CNN. She said, apparently, the clown car can't come into the White House at will. And he agrees with her. The clown car referring to people like Roger Stone and some of the characters that Trump likes to call and, bounce ideas off of. The concern is that in previous iterations, that some of them were allowed literally inside the Oval Office, that some were allowed to influence his decision-making. So we'll see how Susie Wiles does. Just looking back at his first term, he went through 4 chiefs of staff in 4 years. That is not normal. Typically, you might have 1, maybe 2. So we'll see if she can continue the trend line that she started during his campaign of, being able to, again, manage Trump, giving him the freedom to do his thing while also preventing the clown car.
So Wiles and the chief of staff, that's Trump's pick. So the Senate has no say in that. They don't have to confirm that position. Elise Stefanik is among the Senate confirmable spots. The major cabinet positions, like the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, they also do need confirmation from the Senate. But it appears that Trump is trying to circumvent that, as he urged over the weekend for Senate Republicans to open the door to him making what's called recess appointments. That's effectively appointing cabinet secretaries while they are out on recess or break, meaning that they can get into office immediately and then deal with the hearing down the road.
Yeah, Trump wants to name all of his secretaries without a hearing, without them grilling his person, even though, by the way, it looks like the Senate's going to be 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. He has a majority, a safe majority there. But Trump is already kicking the tires on limits here. He doesn't want to be blocked from anything. He doesn't like procedure. He doesn't like people grilling his folks. And he is considering some controversial folks who might not get through in a traditional sense, even with a Republican majority. We're talking about people like RFK Jr., who even among Republicans, there's some who are like, oh, I don't know how I feel about him being like an HHS secretary or someone Senate confirmable like FDA or CDC. There's a guy named Kash Patel, who's sort of an extremist, controversial guy who people have talked about in a national security position. He likely would not get approval through the Senate. So Trump over the weekend saying, hey guys, I want Republicans who now lead the Senate to give me carte blanche to be able to appoint folks during recess. This has been recess appointments, we should mention, go back to George Washington. But in the past decade, effectively, the latter part of Obama, Trump won, and Biden were not able to do it after a Supreme Court decision. Mitch McConnell blocked Obama from doing it at the end, and then vice versa. Senate wanted to affirm its role here. The senators, they're U.S. senators, and they hold hearings, and they advise and consent to the president.
We are important, Moshe. You cannot forget us.
Here are the August body. We have 6-year terms, the longest in Washington. And so the Senate has certain authorities. Trump is saying, I need you to not worry about that authority. And it comes as there's a Senate leadership election. They have to elect who's going to be the majority leader for Republicans. That's an internal vote. It's a private, secret vote held between the 53 Republican senators there. Mitch McConnell has held that role for a very long time. He remains a senator, but is no longer serving in leadership due to his age. He effectively announced that last year after some of those medical scares. So there's 3 men competing, 2 Johns and a Rick. John Thune, John Cornyn, senators from South Dakota and Texas, respectively, and then Rick Scott, senator from Florida, who are running to replace Mitch McConnell. Trump's folks have a favorite. His name is Rick Scott from Florida. MAGA loves him. Elon Musk is tweeting about him. RFK is tweeting about him. They're effectively trying to intervene in the process. And so you saw Rick Scott, John Thune, John Cornyn all basically concede to the president, sure, Mr. President, we'll totally allow you to do recess appointments, even though we were so against it a couple years ago with Joe Biden and others. So it's very interesting to see what comes of that and how much pressure is successful by the Trump folks in pushing Republicans to elect their favorite leader, Rick Scott, who doesn't have much experience in leadership. Again, whether they can create a situation where the Senate can go on recess and the president can appoint his own people. The way the Senate's gotten around this for the last decade is they effectively hold a type of session where one person stays behind in Washington and gavels in the Senate every couple days to prevent the president from doing recess appointments. The thing about the Senate and most of Congress, the thing about the Senate, though, we should mention, is there's a lot of power to the minority, and Democrats would have to allow this. They're probably not going to allow this. So again, this is just the president, as we presumed, testing things, seeing how far we can go. And so already we got a sense this weekend, Jill. It's going to be a very interesting 4 years that requires us to constantly research, like, can he do that? How does that work? Because that's what Trump likes to do.
All right, time for the speed read from Axios. Bitcoin hits an all-time high, nearing 90,000 as of this recording on Monday evening. Moshe, that is way up. It's about 20% up in just the last week, even more than that. The previous record was just north of 80,000 adjusted for inflation. And traders are expecting even bigger numbers to come, placing bets that Bitcoin will reach 100,000 by the end of the year. Other cryptocurrencies also saw huge increases after the election. So Moshe, what is going on? What is happening?
Well, first of all, crypto is crypto, right? Crypto is going to crypto. Like we've seen it go to 60 something thousand and then collapse down to like 15,000 and then go up and go down. You need to have a stomach for crypto because it moves up and down like, besides the meme stocks, not much else. It began the year, by the way, around 40,000 in January, if you look at it. So pretty incredible. Whatever crypto you've bought, whatever Bitcoin, I should say, you bought at the beginning of the year has now doubled as of right now. The thing is, Donald Trump was just elected president, and he has promised to be much friendlier to the crypto community than Biden has, and that, frankly, any administration has in the past. During his campaign, he said he wanted to make America the crypto capital of the planet. He has proposed fighting inflation by integrating Bitcoin into the U.S. economy. He hasn't really explained exactly how he would do that. He has talked about creating a crypto presidential advisory council. Remember, he was going for young men. Crypto was part of that strategy. What is notable is the flip Trump has had on crypto. As recently as 2021, just a couple years ago, he called crypto a scam and said that it should be regulated significantly. Listen to this.
I like the currency of the United States. I think I think the others are potentially a disaster waiting to happen.
So that was him just a couple years ago. He has now changed his tune on crypto. He's also brought in people who are big crypto fans, JD Vance, Elon Musk of Dogecoin, which, by the way, I should mention, is also up, which hasn't been up for a very long time. I made the mistake of buying Doge just before Elon did that SNL appearance, Jill, thinking that it was going to really help. And you could see Doge collapse during Elon's appearance a couple years ago on SNL. I think I might own some Doge. I should go check in to see where that is at this point.
Forget Mo News.
No, let me say this.
Who knew? He was independently wealthy from Dogecoin.
I did not buy enough Doge. Unless Doge has gone up like 8 million%, I do not have enough Doge to retire yet. Can you imagine? What happened to Mo News? Mosh got rich off Dogecoin.
So Mosh forgot that during an SNL appearance by Elon Musk, he bought Dogecoin.
He bought a bunch of Dogecoin. And then he was reminded during the speed read this week to find out how it was doing. And was like, oh my God, how many zeros do I have in my bank account now? We're moving. Alex, we're taking a great vacation, and I'm retiring early. But we can't give all credit to Donald Trump. He's not the only reason Bitcoin has skyrocketed. Crypto supporters and investors raised more than $200 million to support pro-crypto races across the country. Many of those candidates won at a lower level as well. So they have very much decided to integrate themselves in the political system and ensure that they're electing people that, as they consider regulations and laws, will be crypto-friendly. But again, a reminder, as we began this, Bitcoin is known to fluctuate wildly. And so just because it's going to 100,000 doesn't mean it can't go to 50,000 tomorrow. But it's a long-term play. It's a long-term play, like my Doge investment.
That Doge investment is going to pay for Alex's college.
Maybe a textbook, if they even have textbooks.
Moshe, that Dogecoin, you'll be retiring on that Dogecoin.
I'll be retiring or buying a drink on my retirement with a Dogecoin, depending on where it ends up.
Okay, next up from the Times of Israel, authorities are urging Israeli fans to skip a soccer match between Israel and France, which is set to take place in Paris on Thursday. The warning comes after a night of violence in Amsterdam last week, where Dutch authorities say mobs of Arab men unleashed a wave of violence, chasing Israeli fans in town for a soccer game there on motorbikes and then beating them. At least a dozen people were injured or hospitalized in the violence, and hundreds of Israelis took shelter in their hotels for hours. It came after a match between an Israeli team, Maccabi Tel Aviv, and the local team, Ajax. Attackers were equipped with fireworks and moved quickly, targeting Israeli fans with hit-and-run assaults. Now the Israel National Security Council is saying that groups who want to harm Israelis have been identified in a number of European cities, including in Amsterdam and Paris, where, again, Israel has a soccer match later this week.
Yeah, they're also telling Israelis abroad not to wear anything or display anything recognizable, showing that they're Israeli or Jewish. And we're learning more here about those attacks in Amsterdam late Thursday into Friday morning. Dutch authorities saying that the campaign to chase and beat the Israeli fans was coordinated, discussed on messaging apps like WhatsApp, in groups called Jew Hunt. On Telegram, apparently there was also talk of going on quote-unquote Jew hunts. The mayor of Amsterdam saying this is so shocking and despicable that I can't get over it. It's a disgrace. Now, we should say, prior to the attacks, there were videos circulating of Israeli fans pulling down Palestinian flags in town and chanting about Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, saying incendiary things like F the Arabs. There was also an incident with some Israeli fans damaging a taxi cab. So it was already a tense situation. There appeared to be pre-planning, but then things were made all the more tense by some of the actions by Israeli fans there. Now, we should note the Israeli fans didn't assault anyone physically. The open violence begins after the game when members of that large immigrant community from Arab countries in Amsterdam, which we should say is also home to very fervent anti-Israel protests over the last year, got together in gangs in a coordinated fashion after surveilling the Israelis and began the attacks. Now, Jill, you mentioned that major match this week between the Israeli national team and the French national team in Paris. Paris police have already put together a unit of 4,000 officers, including 1,600 at the stadium, as well as on public transit to try and prevent any violence. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, is set to attend the game as he hopes that will potentially bring down tensions and ensure that nothing happens in the lead up or after the match. Still, everyone watching this match very closely, especially given the nature of the population in Paris, too, another city in Europe where you've seen very fervent anti-Israel protests over the course of the last year.
Back to what happened in Amsterdam, Moshe, I got a bunch of questions, as I'm sure you did as well, about what happened in terms of the Israeli fans and the attacks being premeditated by some of the Arabs in the city. And the answer that I gave is that two things can be true at once, is that you did have some Israeli fans behaving badly.
Very inappropriately.
And very inappropriately.
And offensively, yeah.
But you also had a situation where there was a pre-planned, premeditated, quote-unquote Jew hunt in the city of Amsterdam that likely would have happened regardless of how those Israelis behaved at the game.
That appears to be true, and that's what we're hearing from authorities in the Netherlands and the city of Amsterdam.
From ABC News, a Spirit Airlines plane flying from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Haiti was diverted after it was struck by gunfire 4 times while attempting to land in the Haitian capital of Port-au-Prince. The Spirit Airlines plane diverted and then landed safely in nearby Santiago in the Dominican Republic. The plane came within 550 feet of the runway before aborting its landing and diverting to the Dominican Republic. Spirit saying in a statement that no passengers were reported injured and that one flight attendant on board the plane reported unspecified minor injuries and was undergoing medical evaluation. But Moshe, I mean, that is wild.
Yeah, a very scary situation there unfolding. They have stopped all flights. American planes, at least, have stopped all flights to Haiti in the meantime. You can see video of the bullet holes in the plane. A couple of them reached the overhead bin. So very lucky, a miracle here, that no one was killed or seriously injured. The U.S. Embassy in Haiti putting out a security alert saying it's aware of gang-led efforts to block travel to and from Port-au-Prince, which may include armed violence and disruptions to roads, ports, and airports. Remember we told you about earlier this year that the gangs had taken over the airport and were blocking the existing leader of the country from landing there to the point where he ultimately had to step down. So just Haiti, especially in Port-au-Prince, continuing to deal with a crisis there. And as we talk about that, the former UN official who was appointed to replace that interim prime minister, well, he's gone now. Following a power struggle that unfolded amid a wave of kidnappings and killings on the island. His name was Gary Connell. He was hired in late May to serve as interim prime minister for Haiti. Well, his plan was to pave the way for elections, to elect a formal prime minister and president. There has not been one for several years now on the island after the recent president was assassinated. Well, they got enough of him. He is gone. The Transitional Council in Haiti has now named the owner of a chain of dry cleaners and former political candidate in Haiti as his replacement as the new interim leader. Just tragedy unfolding there, and sad for the folks of Haiti as they try to, get some semblance of order in that country.
From the Associated Press, a follow-up from last week's story about 43 monkeys that escaped from a research facility after a caretaker had failed to lock the doors after a feeding. Okay, the good news, 25 of the monkeys have been rescued. The bad news, 18 are still on the loose.
You hear that, South Carolina?
So they're still at large, somewhere about 60 miles outside of Charleston. The research company and law enforcement say that they did spot the monkeys in woods near the facility, and they've been baiting them with food as a way to try to recapture them. And they're going to continue to do so until all of the monkeys return home.
So they haven't said what food it is, but we imagine it might be like a cage filled with bananas. Like, hey, or maybe they feed the monkeys like something more special than bananas, Jill. I don't know if the bananas are bringing them in. Maybe they have to like chocolate or some dessert or something to get them in.
I was weirdly picturing oranges. I don't know why.
So a different fruit.
Yeah, like citrusy sweet. I'm based on nothing.
Okay, maybe we give them a call today to find out like what foods are working and what foods aren't working, at least what worked for the 25 monkeys that came in, the other 18 monkeys. And as we've told you, this facility has had trouble before with its monkeys, alphagenesis. It's known locally as the Monkey Farm down there in South Carolina. In 2018, the Department of Agriculture actually fined the company for 2 other instances where primates escaped back in 2014 and 2016. A reminder again, this is a story we can have fun with because the monkeys pose no risk to public health, we're told. They're about the size of a cat, don't have any diseases on them. So this is not some sort of 90s movie where there's going to be some sort of outbreak due to the monkeys.
But maybe alphagenesis, like get your act together.
Well, we told you last week it was an employee who just forgot to lock the cage after feeding the monkeys. Like, just like double check. Maybe it's like have an alarm if you don't, like, you know, like the thing we have in the back seat when you don't buckle the seatbelt. Like they need that to lock the cages for the monkeys. And if you have this many monkeys, like I think they have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of monkeys in that facility, like just there need to be more. We gotta do more. Something's
not working.
And a warning, just don't eat a banana in public if you're anywhere near there. Someone might grab it. But by someone, I mean a monkey.
And finally, from CNBC, Mattel pulls dolls inspired by characters from the movie Wicked off the shelf after a very unfortunate packaging misprint sent customers to a porn site. So instead of sending customers to www.wickedmovie.com, Mattel mistakenly printed the URL in the box as wicked.com, which I think our audience is mostly adults above the age of 18, so you can search for yourself.
Yeah, unfortunate mistake there. Mattel meant those for kids. Don't go to wicked.com if you're under the age of 18, or frankly, you're of any age and don't want to be
spammed
with whatever wicked.com has. Admission, Jill, I have not gone to wicked.com today and have no plans to, because I feel like those are the types of websites young boys go to that eventually bring viruses to your parents' computer. Someone I know may have done that at some point.
Speaking totally of just something I heard could have potentially happened.
I was never a teenage boy. Anyway, the company is now advising customers who bought the dolls to throw out the packaging or for parents to obscure the link so your curious child doesn't try to look up the website.
But what a weird story.
Wickedmovie.com. Wickedmovie.com is where we'd like you to go. All right, we end here with On This Day in History. On this day in 1927, Joseph Stalin becomes the head of the Soviet Union. He rules for 24 years, one of the record holders in terms of longest ruling Russian leaders, though Vladimir Putin is about to surpass him as longest ruling modern Russian leader. On this day in 1954, after processing more than 12 million immigrants starting in 1892 through 1954, Ellis Island officially closes as an immigration station and detention center. It is now a tourist site. I highly recommend it if you come to New York and want to take a boat out there and learn a bit of the history of the melting pot that is America. Jill, I was recently able to find paperwork of my grandfather on my mother's side coming through there as a 14-year-old boy on a boat called the Cherbourg. You can go through the archives there at Ellis Island. And so he comes in about 6 months before World War II starts with his father in January of 1939. So it's very cool to be able to get your hands on those documents. They've made a point of archiving them and digitizing them.
Wait, from where? Where's your grandfather from?
So my father's family is from Morocco. My father was actually born in Morocco. They would make their way out of Morocco in the 60s to Israel. And then my dad would come here. My mom's family is originally from Germany and Poland. The Polish side of the family actually came through there around the turn of the century and then made their way to Superior, Wisconsin, up there in northern Wisconsin. So you see the documentation there. And you can actually follow the maps at Ellis Island. And you see that as the U.S. was bringing in all these immigrants in the 1800s and 1900s, they're like, where should we fill up part of the country? And so for a certain period of time, they're like, everyone's going to Minnesota and like northern Wisconsin. Anyway, my grandfather, my mom's dad, was born in Germany. They escape as the Nazis take over there in the 30s, realizing that things are going south. And so he would make his way on a boat initially to then Palestine, and then on another boat through Ellis Island.
I'm very fascinated by this because it's something that I really want to do for my family. You went to Ellis Island and found these documents, or your mom found them?
They're available. They have archives online. I didn't actually literally have to go there. But if you go there, they have an incredible library and archives that is more extensive. Say you're having trouble with your research on the regular internets, you can head over there and they have much more comprehensive archives.
Okay, I guess I know it. I guess I've got my weekend plans.
We know what Jill's doing this weekend. All right, we end here with a bit of pop culture history, some music history. As we promised, on this day in 2002, Missy Elliott releases her album Under Construction. So that turns 22 years old today, hence the clue at the top. Flip it and reverse it. It's you're from an ambiento or whatever that is, which backwards from yeto or whatever is I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. But she like reverses it in the song. I feel like I knew this back in 2002, but I was just reminded of it when I researched this on this day in history. Work It is a great song though. It's a good beat.
Moshe Feilander, today I learned that the lyrics were reversed because I just Googled it as well. I will not Google wicked.com, but I did Google Work It lyrics.
Is it worth it? Let me work it. I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. And then she says, I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it in reverse. Get it?
I do now, as I see it written in black and white. Very
the
clever.
lyrics, I should warn, get more explicit in the next verse.
They belong on wicked.com.
And Jill, finally, on this day 3 years ago, hashtag free Britney. Britney was freed from a conservatorship that had controlled her life and money for 14 years. Though by the look of her Instagram feed lately, I don't know if that was the right call.
He went there, people.
I'm just saying, it makes me sad. Her social media feed makes me very sad.
All right, what does not make me sad? This podcast, it makes me happy. No. And I missed doing it yesterday, although it was nice after such a busy week to have a 3-day weekend. Thank you all for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It definitely helps us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And please review us in the App Store. Yeah.
What other podcasts are you going to get an understanding of recess appointments, UN funding, monkeys on the loose, an update on Haiti, and a deep dive into Missy Elliott's lyrics? You're not going to find it anywhere else. I promise you. I promise you that. That's your review. Write that down. Put it in Apple.
All right. Thanks, guys.